The Lucky Bum by Ron Day.
At some point during my early teen years, a couple of my friends began calling me Lucky Ron. Now, I'm not sure why this happened, since, as far as I can tell, I've never been too lucky at all. I've never inherited a large estate from a wealthy uncle. My unique talents behind the wheel of an automobile were never discovered by a large NASCAR sponsor. My hopes of playing for the Dallas Cowboys or Minnesota Vikings were quashed in high school when my doctor said I couldn't play football because of a fused vertebrae in my neck. My $250 college fund never really matured, and my career as a Navy pilot never got off the ground for the same reason that my football career failed. What's the deal anyway? Lucky? Me? Nah, I don't think so. But my old childhood friend Harold, now he was lucky. Harold started out as an only child in a moderately well-to-do family. When he was 15, his parents were killed in an auto accident, leaving him an inheritance of, after taxes, $3,000. Lucky. He was sent to live with his mother's spinster aunt. Amazingly, a total renovation of a spare bedroom for him cost $3,000 exactly. Now, that was indeed lucky. And when he graduated from high school in 1965, Uncle Sam sent him on an all-expenses-paid tour of Vietnam. When he got back home, he'd saved enough money to buy a new car and fill it with gas. That was lucky, too. After Vietnam, he needed a job and was lucky enough to find one with a small company that manufactured glass bottles for the soft drink industry. At $3.25 an hour, people said he was lucky to find such a good job with a future. Harold met a girl, Brenda, in 1969 and asked her to marry him. She agreed, but soon thereafter ran off to Denver with one of his co-workers, a fellow named Buck. The betrayal, of course, saddened Harold, but his boss told him he was lucky and promoted him with a 15-cent an hour raise to replace the current Lothario who had stolen his girl. 3 years later, when the bottle factory folded, Harold took a cut in pay and gratefully went to work as a gas station attendant. That job ended with a gas shortage of 1973. Harold told himself he was lucky he hadn't wasted too many years learning a now useless trade. Because he was out of work, he had to sell the car he'd bought after his tour of Vietnam. He got $850 for that car. His friends told him he was lucky to have gotten that much, since never again would a gas hogs like his 1968 Dodge Charger with a Hemi engine have any resale value. Harold got real lucky in June of '75. That's when he married Susie Choo Choo Trainer. He also took a new and promising job at Sunray Inc. Sunray manufactured modular solar panels, the only energy source for the future, as his business card proudly proclaimed. And Susie was quite an eyeful, too. Harold's friends and co-workers were envious of his good luck in snagging such a beauty. As it turned out, though, Harold's real luck was a stranger who pointed out a 3-page full-color photograph of Susie, fully nude and proud of it, in an April 1974 issue of Beautiful Dames magazine. Harold and Susie parted ways in August of 1975. The divorce was final in February of '76. The judge told Harold he was lucky. Most divorce cases took over a year. In May of 1977, Harold's boss at Sunray Inc. called him into his office, shook his hand, and asked him to sit down. The company was doing far better than anticipated, he told Harold, and because of this, he was giving him a 30-cent an hour raise and promoting him to supervising manager. Harold was now making $4.85 an hour, more than he'd ever made in his life. He told his friends that he knew he was luckier than most. Sunray Inc. went out of business in June of that year. Harold hadn't yet closed on the home he decided to purchase after his promotion and raise, and he was able to cancel the contract. His realtor was unhappy, of course, and said Harold was extremely lucky he was only losing his $1,000 down payment. Harold eventually landed a decent job working in a large department store selling refrigerators and freezers. He did well, and in a few years the store offered him a better job at a higher rate of pay at a sister store in San Francisco. Harold accepted the job, and a month later was living in San Francisco in a small one-bedroom apartment with a kitchenette, selling his small import car to pay for the first month's rent and damage deposit. He was tired of the tiny car anyway and was glad to get rid of it. He considered himself lucky to be within walking distance of his new workplace. Living in San Francisco was more expensive than he thought it would be. Harold had to close out his meager savings account of $400 just to furnish his small abode and buy enough food to last until he received his first month's check. He was lucky he'd had the foresight to save that little nest egg, he told himself. The new department store was much longer than Harold's previous place of employment, with many more employees. By the end of the first month, though, he was starting to feel comfortable and had even made a friend or two among his fellow salesmen. When payday finally came, he smiled broadly as he pulled a check for $586.75 out of the envelope bearing his name. Out of habit, he double-checked the envelope before throwing it into the trash. He found a pink slip inside. They were sorry he'd been let go, it said. But because total sales were down at all West Coast locations, they were cutting back employees by 53%. Harold was lucky he double-checked the envelope. Otherwise, he would have been embarrassed when he showed up for work the next day. Harold became discouraged and despondent. He moved out of his small apartment, losing his damage deposit because he'd failed to give advance notice. He began sleeping in a nearby alley. Eventually, he sought out the comforting taste of alcohol. Now unemployed and without transportation in a large and strange city, his immediate future was looking mighty dim. But still, even after purchasing several fifths of Webley's Mountain Mist, he had over $100 left out of his paycheck. And that was lucky. Harold became a street person, roaming the sidewalks of San Francisco. Every now and then, he'd earn a few dollars by sweeping those sidewalks and washing windows for business owners. His hair grew long, his face was unshaven, and he and his clothing smelled bad. It wasn't the life he'd pictured for himself, but at least he was alive, and he was lucky he still had his health. One day, a stranger appeared before Harold's bleary eyes and persuaded him to go to his home, a large home on a high hill with a long driveway and perfect green lawns. He filled a tub with hot, soapy water, made Harold take a bath, his first in over a year, then gave him clean clothes to wear. Afterwards, he fed him a large meal of pot roast, potatoes and carrots, lots of cold milk, and huge slices of warm bread lathered with real butter. He asked Harold if he knew anything about computers. Harold, of course, didn't know a thing, had only heard the word mentioned a couple times in his life. The man said it didn't matter. He told Harold that computers would soon control all facets of the world's economy, that no business or even government would be able to operate without them, and that every home in the U.S. would eventually have one. He then went on to say that a friend of his, a Mr. Gates, had started a computer company. He was looking for someone like Harold, a smart man who learned fast, a man who just needed a break, to train as a marketing director for him in the city of Seattle. The pay would be excellent, with free lodging the first 6 months in Mr. Gates' home. It could be a great opportunity, the man continued, saying Harold could be off the street, living the life of luxury for the rest of his days. As Harold listened to the stranger's words, he thought back over the years. He remembered the bottle factory that went out of business and his brief stint as a gas station attendant before gas station attendants became obsolete. He recalled the solar panels that were the only source for the future, and the department store that had promised him so much then left him penniless on the streets. He thought of the women who had hurt and humiliated him, and of the many people who had found ways to relieve him of his money. Harold decided then and there that it was time for him to get smart, to finally take control of his life, of his destiny, instead of letting other people control them. It was time, he decided, to put the hard lessons of his past to good use. He looked proudly at the stranger, and in a steady and firm voice refused the offer. He would never be taken in again. As the man drove him back to the streets of San Francisco, Harold took a final backwards glance at the big house. He smiled as he remembered the warm bath, the great food, and the clean clothing he was still wearing. I really am a lucky guy, he said quietly to himself. Thanks for listening.